Make sure they hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fine.
I'm loud enough they can hear me from wherever.
Yes, you are.
We didn't have to agree so quickly.
Okay, Twyla, you ready? You good? All right. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you for your patience as we're making a few copies and making sure everybody was ready to go for tonight. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thanks, Kim.
Second.
That was Jim? Thanks, Jim. Motion and a second. Any further conversation about the agenda? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? All right, thank you. Motion carries. Let's move to item 3. Review and approve the May 9th negotiation minutes. Those were sent out just early of the previous meeting, and so we did not approve those at the last meeting. So we would entertain a motion to do so at this meeting. Hopefully we've had a chance to read those, look those over, and if there's anything we need to correct, certainly let us know. But otherwise, we entertain a motion to approve the May 9th negotiation meetings.
I make it a motion to approve the May 9th minutes.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion about the minute? Look okay to everybody? All right, I'll go ahead and call for the question. And all in favor of approval of the May 9th negotiation minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Thank you. That motion carries. Okay, item 4, tentative agreements. I'm not sure if we have any at this juncture, right? From last time. So let's move to item 5. Discussion for topics for negotiation. You can see we have items A through J. We've kind of grouped a couple of A and B kind of together over the last few conversations, and then kind of C, D, and E. Those next 3 kind of the same groupings, and then each individual one after that was kind of all individual. So certainly not any specific order we have to go in, but if we'd like to start with our salaries and TFFR conversations, we might as well start there. Got a big night tonight. So at the last meeting, we did hear a counter offer from the DEA. That counter offer was for 9 3/4 in comparison to the essentially 3.5 that the district had offered. So let's pick up from there. Is there any additional offers, any counter offers?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I do know that the administrators settled on Friday and settled at the 1.5% TFFR and 1% base. I would counter that we would accept the same.
Okay, thank you. So that's the original offer that we
The
had.
1.5% and 375 on base, which is ultimately the 1%, slightly over 1%, but I like.
And with steps and lanes,
And the steps in
and steps and lanes.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm writing all this down properly, primarily because of the steps piece, I think. So steps, so the counteroffer is steps plus essentially 1%, which is at 375-ish,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
369.20 or 369.50 if we really wanted to go 1%, but
Okay.
I like 375.
All right, so essentially 1%, but
Yeah.
375, okay? Plus then the 1.5 TFFR.
Correct. And understanding, I also know that I do believe the administrators got their steps as well, correct?
The administrators got the comparable of the 3.5%. So that was the target goal. 1% was added to the base, correct, Kent?
Correct.
1% was added to their base, which is that automatically calculates on their salary schedule through the steps piece. So that's not an automatic step advancement. So that 1% there, and then the 1.5% TFFR. So that's
So the net effect was a 3.57 in year one and 3.52 in year two, if you combine those two together.
Okay. So they don't get the years of service? So their years of service is frozen
So
for
that's
this year?
No,
well, that's the trickle down of
that's
the,
other
of the
1%,
base,
right,
of
so-
the other 1%.
So the way the formula works for the admins, it's 1% on the base, so that's a solid 1%. And then the way that flows through the formula, there's also the service and the time, and the education. And the equivalent of that with that 4% inflation factor is another 1%, basically. And then the 1.5 TFFR. So it's those three together that add up to the net average impact. It's different for administrators depending on the position. But the schedule that I sent you, Jim, if you look at that.
The average of all of those combined in the first year was 3.57,
Right.
and the second year was 3.52.
And there was some administrators where the percentage was higher and some that was lower. But the average overall was the basically 1 plus 1 plus 1.5.
Yeah, well, when you take a look at how the administrators are paid, you almost need a doctorate degree to understand it.
We had a business, actually a business manager, we kind of implied that too. That the formula was a little bit
We agree.
complicated.
That's a very challenging formula to work through. Okay, so the way I interpret this, Jim and the rest of the table, steps comparable to 2%, the 375 comparable to about 1%, and then 1.5 TFFR. So adding those up, basically 4.5%. Ken, do you have the handout that I was looking at earlier with you today that just kind of showed our long-range
With the
plan with
TFFR?
TFFR? Yes, let's make sure that they get a copy of that as well. Want to paint the picture, obviously. The long-range goal is to try to get TFFR sitting somewhere in that 75-80% coverage by the district range. And to do so, though, I think it's important that the Teachers Association recognize how those expenses are different at the district level. So, for instance, there's, as you've learned through TFFR contributions, if we increase your TFFR contribution, let's say we covered it all, the full 24.5% today. There's a charge back for that because they also, in order to credit you for the dollars that you get for your TFFR, so it's not deducted like from your salary, so it's a win-win for you however you get it. That's a charge back on to TFFR. So for the district to cover, if we were to cover all of your retirement, let's say, the 24%, we would essentially expend 27%. So there's about 3%, I don't know what they call it, just a
26.
buyback?
Well,
Or
that's just-
a pay up,
that's
a
what
true
Jay-
up?
That's what Jay and I were talking about. It's basically
Oh.
their actuary tables. That's the way they're able to have their model work. Is that, well, those salary dollars aren't going out, but it doesn't affect what they're collecting for retirement income. So to keep their table solid, they have to basically impute those wages and.
As if you've earned them.
Right, as if it was earned and was given. So it's a premium for using that different model is what it is.
Right.
But the flip side is those dollars are going into those employee accounts.
Correct.
So those are real dollars.
So that's the win-win, I guess. So you can see where we're currently sitting now at 2018, 2019 with the state overall total at 24.5%. Our goal would be to increase the coverage of the coverage of the employer so that it reduces in exchange the coverage of the employee that's required down closer to where we would be covering just short of 20%, 19.95%, where the employee would be covering 6.12. We feel like I feel like too, that's a good middle ground area. It puts us right in the middle with obviously some districts that cover 100% TFFR, but some districts that are like us that only cover the 12.75 and 11.75, puts us in the middle ground. And I think that's a good recruiting tool. I think that's good for our employees as well. But to do so, we'll have a net effect contribution of 26% into the teacher retirement fund. And so it's that long range planning I just want you to be mindful of as we have this conversation. The first year, the first year, if we want to talk just even 1 year at a time, the true, even prior to knowing all the details about these extra penalties, if you will, or contributions that are required from TFFR, without even knowing the insurance implications, which will be, determined here soon. The true 3% or 3.5% that we were sitting at with the steps at 2% and the TFFR contribution at 1.5 to get to that 3.5. That's real legit maximum dollars. There's the conversation. I think we're very close. You're asking for 4.5%, whether we're talking 1 year or two, and we're sitting at 3.5. So we're not incredibly far off. But I'm not, after going through the budget numerous times with Kent. I would love to be able to give more. I really would. We can't find it, and so what, we wanted to have this conversation. I know there was some conversation late last week in regards to maybe some new monies or something from the state. We wanted to make sure we had that conversation, because if there was something we had missed, we certainly want to know that. But we've looked at that as well, and unless there's something on top, we're not feeling like there's anything missed. So go ahead, Jim.
Dr. Harker, on the 1.5% TFFR, do you have to pay TFFR on it?
Do we have to pay TFFR?
Right.
We do. So essentially, that's like, for us, it's closer to 1 3/4.
So that's why this has such a,
Is that the penalty?
Yes.
The problem, it's not the problem. It's the reason that this hasn't been, right, you've talked about the teachers have looked at this. It's advantageous to the teachers. If there's a pool of money and there's a way to get it to the teachers, this is advantageous to the teachers. The reason I believe it hasn't been addressed in the past is it's expensive. It's just, if you look at that, to add 1.5% for the district, it costs the district 1 3/4. That's just the way the formula works. That's how they're able to keep their tables solid on the retirement side. To add 2%, or excuse me, 3%, it actually increases the employer contribution 3.5%. It goes all the way through. So it's great for the employees, because ultimately it's less taxable. It's awesome. But when you follow through the math, it just taking 6%, if you add 6% to the current 12.75, it is an 18.75, like it should be. It's 19.95. It's just the exponential impact of that transition in, and which makes it, from my standpoint, as we're going through the numbers, and Dr. Acker and I, it's how do we take the current salary schedule, combine it with this, and keep it sustainable. The goal isn't to do 1.5 and 1.5 and then go down to 0, because we can't keep improving it. The goal will be how to come up with a plan that's sustainable, that we can implement this whole approach. And maybe it isn't doable. That's what the discussions we've had. Maybe it isn't. But maybe we just.
What is the cost of the 1.5% for next year?
Well, 1%, because it's basically, it's all the admins, and it's all certified, and it's all the new hires too. So that affects everybody. So when I look at 1%, it's roughly 230,000. So just under $250,000.
And that's for everybody?
That's for everybody, because it applies to everybody. So we back that off, just to kind of say, okay, what's the cost to the district of doing that versus just a straight 1% pay raise? Well, there's the FICA component, there's those different parts.
That's 7.65, correct?
Yep, but it does put more dollars in the teacher. As we've looked at the math, it is advantageous, but to combine the two, we want it to be sustainable, and I think that's where Dr. Acker, when he mentions the plan, what we've talked about is how do we set up something where we can keep going on this, and that's where that 1.5 comes in for this year, and then look at next year and going forward. And this is what we laid out before we even looked at 2021 budget numbers, 2020, 22, 23 budget numbers. This is just a plan to get to that roughly 75 to 80% of the district picking up the required teacher contribution. So, Dr. Auger, anything to add to that, or is this?
I don't think so unless they have questions. I want to make sure that everybody around this table understands how that's derived.
But I would say that the combination of those two and the sustainability is probably a pretty good reason that this hasn't been addressed in the past, I'm guessing. And that's why, one of the questions Jay had, if you look at the Class A schools, there's only a couple that do it, and I'm guessing that's part of their challenge.
How many?
I think there's three.
Three?
I think Watford, Williston, and West Fargo
Okay.
are the ones that do it. Maybe we should become, start with a W.
That's true.
So I think that's kind of where the work is, whether we agree on 1% or 1 year or 2 years or however long you want to go down that road. I think it would behoove us to spend some time looking at that whole big picture, because our goal is to definitely make sure that whatever we do can be sustainable. And obviously our goal is to do the very best we can for our staff. And so with your counter, I would say really the biggest issue with the counter is the addition on the base. It just takes that base and magnifies that. We would, that's the challenge. It's really obviously the 2%. That's what we offered as well. The 2%, 1/2, that's already there. It really boils down to that extra 1% to add to the base that puts us outside that, that durability. Maybe, we know in the second year we will receive the on-time funding, and we're aware that may help us, true up. So,
I believe that's only a portion. Isn't that, I believe that's a
First.
5 or 6 year plan.
it is. It's the first year's half, and then the next 5 years you make up the rest of that half. So yeah, it's all incremental. So we're very appreciative that you're entertaining the TFFR conversation. I think that's the best way to stretch the dollars the furthest for the employees. We'd like to get there somehow.
Other than that 1.5, is there anything that can happen that can help to negotiate the difference between us?
Mr. Anderson, what if in the second year, what if we agreed to this in the first year, minus the 1%, of course, did the 2% steps and 1.5 TFFR? How risky would it be to go to 1 3/4 TFFR the second year?
Okay. Well, again, it's bringing in the plan. Based on the on-time funding worksheet that I got from Adam today, would the dollars be there to sustain 1 3/4? Absolutely. That being said, the plan would be to get to 6. That's the ultimate plan. And so it would depend on what came with that 1 3/4. What is that calculated on? I think that's the question to that. That's where that adjustments to the base and those career increment cleanups that I think we agree is worthwhile. When we talk about an automated system, we did a lot of work on that. What we concluded for year 1 is that to do this for year 1, it isn't compatible with addressing those extra dollars in that career increment section. But if we could combine that in with year 2, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
But it all drives, it's all driven by this gross up factor. So basically, to do our plan at 1.5 for next year, the effective contribution from the district for every dollar, not just the adjustment, but for every dollar in certified admin would be 16.25%. So to add another quarter to that would actually be another, I know it's splitting here, but it's more than 0.25%. It would bring that to like 16.6%. So that's about almost 4% higher than where we are today, which, again, is $1 million, roughly.
So 1/4% would cost us $1 million?
Is the 4%, the total adjustment from where we're at today. So the 12 and 3/4. So today we're required to do 12 and 3/4.
Right.
But effectively, for year two, that number for every dollar would be.
Oh, so if you went to that extra,
Right.
what would it cost if we did the 1/4% year one?
That would be the same conversation. I guess it would be that grossed up. The cost right now is about 1 3/4. So if we did 1 3/4, it would be probably 2.1% would be the net effect of that.
Okay, so if, and I can only go on, what the number is that? And I think I almost have them memorized.
You probably do.
I'm gonna use my calculator if that's okay. And I'm gonna do some rough numbers here.
Yep,
And I don't have, obviously, payroll numbers for next year, because the sheet that
Yep.
you sent us just
Yep.
has the stuff from this year.
Yep.
And that is roughly $17.8 million. So if you do that times the, oops. Zero, one. It's about a $311,000 to do it this year.
Yep.
On, and then I understand that this is, that TFFR is all interconnected, and that, you know, admins, the principals get it. Just some gentlemen at the table get it as well, you know.
Yep,
You
yep.
know, so it's, I understand it goes to everybody. To everybody.
No, from my standpoint, Jim, really the challenge I have is when we went through the best offer calculations, we hadn't had our health insurance committee meeting yet. We hadn't gone through all of the gross up implications, and we maybe should have, but we hadn't. Since that time, we've had time to look at the numbers even closer, and I think that was the last meeting we had, is when there was a question about could we move that number. From my standpoint, that because we budget a year at a time, even though we're talking about potentially a 2-year agreement, because we budget a year at a time, sitting here today, I'd be more comfortable staying at 1.5 and going to 2% in year two than doing anything with year one, because year one is already exceeding where we're projected in. That's just the, you know, from where I'm sitting. When you look at that new money, you look at the new positions, there's a lot of unknowns in year two that would still be able to be discussed if we don't have a 2-year agreement. But as I look at the numbers of Dr. Hawker today, there's a lot of, you know, just budgeting 1 year at a time, that I really feel with the recommendation for health insurance was 13 to 19%. The board hasn't acted on that yet, but that's a big number too. 80% of which is picked up by the school district, and it all goes back to that agreement we had at the first meeting of what's the new money. It's kind of, well, here's this pot of money, and we subtract from that and get to a number. So you're correct, the 311,000, that's probably accurate. But when I look at year one, the dollars aren't there as much as they would be potentially in year two, as I sit here tonight.
I understand. Looking at our certified retirees and just utilizing the numbers that you use for your rough estimation.
Yep.
Our 14 certified retirees had a total compensation, not including extra stuff, extracurriculars, of 1.5 million. Utilizing the 75,000, that's a $33,000 savings on those people that we hired. So it's an extra 471,000 that's there based upon new people come in using that 75,000 number,
Right.
versus people who retired.
And
Is it possible to use that?
Well, and again, it goes back to the 75,000 number was used with a 12.75 calculation on TFFR, because that's what's been used for years. What this does is that changes that calculation for new hires, because potentially, you know, our plan for 2021 would be that new number is 16.24% plus 765. So, but you're right. I mean, there is a savings
There's
there,
some
but
savings there.
but there's an expense side that's getting picked up.
I'm just looking at, you know, is there any way to pick up that 44,500 cost somehow? You know, and Dr. Hawker, forgive me, but I feel that we've given and given and given, and there hasn't been a whole lot of offer, you know, for us. And we've done a lot of giving, we've given in a lot of, you know, some things and some language and things like that. So I'm hoping for something, is what I'm hoping for, even if I have to fish a little bit. You know,
And 1/4%. That's kind of what we're saying, go to 1 3/4 instead of 1.5 first year.
I mean,
And I get all that, you know, I understand that, but we have, and everything I've looked at over the last few years, we've added staff and we've sustained. We got nice raises 4 years ago and we sustained and we rolled over a nice amount of money. We got a pretty good raise the year after, both admins and teachers, and I believe that we rolled over 2.5. And so we've never, in all the time I've been doing this, we've never not rolled over money into our rollover fund. We've always done that, and I understand your concern. I totally get that, but in my time doing this, we've never, for lack of better words, deficit spent. We have always rolled over into our rollover fund. We have a nice rollover fund. We have the biggest rollover fund of the top 9 schools by a long ways. And that's, because we've done things that have been fiscally responsible. I get that. You know, so, you know, I understand the sustainability, but I think we've proven in this district that we can sustain, because we've done it year in and year out. We are the only school in the top 9 that has not deficit spent in the last 4 years. We're the only one. The only school that has put money away every single year. And I think that's great. We're not asking to deficit spend. That's not right. But we have a lot in our fund, and I understand we have to figure out something on buildings. I get that. But we've never deficit spent in my time. We've always rolled over.
Well, should we go visit for a minute?
Sure.
Okay. We will go visit for a minute, just take a break, and we'll be back.
Caucus.
Yep. All right, I guess official caucus.
Terminology.
Yes. Gotta go in.
Does that mean,
Go ahead, sir. Follow you in.
And they better be in a bag, not shoved in their pocket. The ones that we talked about, it is one reason too. I also liked it. I like Yeah, second. I know. It is very, I honestly probably. I don't know, I got it on. They were one year. I so like not in the district. I think that's for us. Yes, they
I know, I was sitting there thinking.
Oh, yeah? Gallery tonight. That's nice. I told my parents were like, you guys have because they keep they're like, yes, yeah, they do. Yeah, I miss those good old
No, I can tell you that. I don't know how to, I think I have to ask I can text her and ask her. So here, you want to go to
This is such a weird table. I can't stand this table.
I know.
Suck it in and walk by. Oh my. Is Dave track here this weekend? That's exciting.
But when it's done, it's
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
such a,
Huge undertaking.
well, it's 3 days and
That's
you're exhausted.
yeah,
I mean, Sunday is,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah. Like
I'm sorry.
You're okay. We still have one in the room.
Okay.
You're fine, I would say. Sorry, I just
I guess we have 2 in the restaurant. Can't count.
Still kind of, oh man, strong bladders like a teacher.
So how long have you coached golf?
14 years.
And so
I've been the-
how normal is the weather this year?
Thank you. This year, weather was not great. Not so I was the assistant for 2 or 3 years, and then I was the head coach since 2008 for boys. And this is
So
not
this is
normal weather.
unusually bad.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
common.
it's usually pretty bad, but this year was rescheduling all that. Yeah.
Well, what are these? Are these old ones?
That's May 9th minutes.
These are the
Yeah,
ones
but we
to
didn't even
decide.
sign
I just know
We
that.
didn't sign anything.
What?
We didn't sign
Okay.
anything.
Yeah, I know.
Didn't sign, they didn't have
Right here. They're
Well, what are
coming.
these?
They're just extras in case.
Okay.
Relax, Kim.
I was gonna start signing stuff.
Settle down.
All right, we'll go ahead and resume from our caucus. The school district, the school board would like to counter to the Teachers Association with this offer. In year 1, 2% steps and 1.5% TFFR, like we've previously talked. And in year 2, 2% steps and 2% TFFR. So that's making up for the quarter and the quarter each year, and just bring it all into the second year. So second year would be essentially the movement with steps. And of course, lanes are always worked in there if anybody qualifies to move lanes at 2% and then 2% TFFR.
You're gonna force us to go caucus now, you know.
Okay.
Yep, go for it.
If you need to,
Yep.
just let us know. We understand. We do appreciate the conversations that we're having thus far, and we feel like we're very much trying to meet those that request. The safest thing for the district would be to stay at our maximum initial offer of that 3.5% in year one, but we're willing to forego that in year two, knowing that we will get 50% of that additional on-time funding that we haven't started to receive yet. And then we obviously know we've still got to deal with an unknown out there of insurance and all those other things, and so we'll just have to make that work.
I suppose we better caucus.
Okay, that is fair. Would you like us to leave and you staying here, or you want to go?
No, we can just go.
Just go ahead? Okay.
Besides, that's where
There's
good stuff
cookies
is.
in there.
Okay.
We want a caucus in there.
Yeah, but we were gonna give it to you, the elect.
Son's playing right now.
Who's playing?
Tristan, my eldest. I missed last week because of
Is there any more?
Yeah, he'll have
What position does it come in?
first base.
First base.
That's a fun position. You about get to touch the ball almost every time.
Yeah, he really likes it. And our youngest got to pitch for the first time last night.
How'd you do?
And not bad. He had 3 strikes and threw a runner out.
Good?
Yeah, so for his first time, and Ty was all nervous. He was mad that the coach was putting him in because he struggles right now. And Ty's like, why would you do that? And he was going to go because Guy Fridley is one of the coaches. He's like, I'm going to talk to Guy. I said, you can't do that. I said, you have no faith in our son. He was like, you've seen him? He's not ready. That's all I kept saying. He's just not ready. And then he's going to be down and he's crying because he said, I just hope he throws the ball to me. And I said, you see, I looked at him, he goes, I know. So we were pretty excited for him.
Was that, I saw at lunch today, you didn't get a sit line.
Well, I was going to if he sat alone, or if our table was pretty full. I noticed only Kim didn't show today.
Yeah.
Sorry.
She blew us off.
Wasn't even on my radar.
She was making cookies.
She was.
No.
She was making bean dip.
No.
It shouldn't. They can invite whoever they want.
Oh, they can't do it.
Look at me.
You're good at that.
And if we were to do that, let's make a caucus
You could have brought the cookies with you.
Want a cookie?
No, I'm kidding.
I was wondering what happened to the coffee.
The pot started leaking. Do you want some? It's in the,
It's okay.
yeah, it was,
I need more Tylenol. I know.
That's all you left?
Well, we didn't eat any in there. But the dip's coming.
That dip, I need to spill the bottom.
You guys ready to come back?
Yes, we are.
All right, go ahead and come back from our second caucus of the evening.
We recognize, Dr. Hawker, that, and we appreciate the increase in year two and with a 2-year contract. And in regards to money, we'll settle on that.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, we can check off A and B. Okay, let's move to item C. Well, C and D, E, we're kind of all grouped together in regards to conversations there. So I know, Mr. Harris, you had prepared some language to share back in regards to the PTO. And then, of course, the sunset clause and pilot leave, those are kind of part of that conversation, or perhaps not, however we want to move forward. So we'll review those as soon as Mr. Harris passes that out.
Which one of
I've got
those?
some proposed language. I've got it in two different, I've got it with our current agreement with everything that would be lined out, or the way it would be written. We'd ask for it both ways. What would you like to look at?
It helps to have it with the...
With the lined out?
Yep,
All right.
with the lined out so that we can take a look and see how
It changes.
it changes.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, I have to
Get
sit
you
there
this.
with the negotiated agreement open going. Something to do it like. Uh-oh. Do you have another
I
one?
might have one.
Do you have another one? Mr. Harris?
Yes, fine.
Okay, we need two more. Do you have a second? Do you have another one?
Got lots.
We need another one too. For Jay. You have one? No. There's next one right there. There's next one right there.
Mr. Harris, do you want to kind of take the lead on this conversation?
After our conversation last time, I'll be honest with you, the reason why the PTO came up is we kind of felt like we were advocating for you as well as trying to clean up some things, and we really did honestly think it was a win-win. I was a little surprised that it was felt like a shot at you. So if that was from my delivery or that, I apologize. I did take the information that we had talked about from the discussion, and I think I was able to clean up some language. So if you take a look, I propose that we look at the PTO as paid time off, and remove the personal from there. I've put 6 items of language in there, and then as you can see from that if we adopt that move to PTO, that would eliminate a large amount of what is currently in the agreement. So if we take a look at line number 1, proposing that we offer 13 days of paid PTO, accumulative to 120 days.
And that would be the same, correct? The 120?
Yes.
Yes, sir,
Okay.
as it currently
I know it's
is.
still, I know it's still in red, so.
And
Because I think you had put in
185.
85 last time, yep.
So 120, so it's.
Yep.
okay, same.
And then, to your concern, Jim, that somebody like you who's already banked it, there's no incentive. We're proposing that after you have accumulated up to 120 days, employees who don't use their PTO would be compensated at a rate of $100 a day. So that there continues to be an incentive for those who have already or will reach that 120 days. Number 2, employees will be compensated for accumulated PTO at the time of their departure from the district at a rate of $20 per day. Again, that stays consistent with what our current practice is. Employees who exceed their PTO will have 1 day of salary/benefits deducted from the pay period immediately following the absence. We did remove the cost of the sub.
Very good.
Use of the PTO shall be limited to 6 consecutive days, which makes it consistent with what it currently is. And then the, unless waived by the superintendent, that's red only because we've moved it from another section up in there. So that's the same as it is now. PTO leave may be taken in a minimum amounts of 1 hour at a time with half-hour increments after the first hour. That ties in that
That's that
pilot language
language,
from
yes.
this year.
Yeah.
The change from sick personal leave to PTO will be implemented at the beginning of the 1920 contract year as a pilot. Members of the DEA negotiations team and the school board's negotiations team will meet on a mutually acceptable date prior to May 15th. I probably need to put 2020 in there. To determine if the PTO replacement clause will be made a permanent change. If it is determined that the PTO is not mutually acceptable, the certified agreement will revert to the 1819 work agreement language, leave language. So those are the main changes. If you go through there, you can see that eliminates a lot of what's currently in the agreement.
Mr. Harris, just a quick question. What will happen with the current hours that are in the personal leave bank?
I would propose that they be transferred to the sick leave bank. And if you look at that, since we would no longer need to have 2 banks, since we're dealing with 1 set of time, I would propose that gets transferred to the sick leave.
And there's about how many hours in there?
There's
80?
about, no,
40.
there's
40.
60 or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it was used. It was 80 and I think we used 17 or something, 16 this year. So I think there's like 64. But I'd have to double check that.
Question about the language, a few things actually. I know for one particular employee in our building right now that has had some catastrophic things happen, and she ran out of personal leave and sick leave this year and has had to take day deducts. They have worked with her and not had it come directly out of the next paycheck, but spread it out over her paycheck, so she still received small increments of money, not much, but something. But this language would keep her from having that, from them making that ability happen. Because as we know, a day deduct is significant.
Are those, was that catastrophe eligible for the sick leave bank?
Not the way it's written, because it was not the way it's written.
I'm not, without being aware of the specifics, I don't know. I don't.
So I was just wondering, is there, I mean, if it's multiple days that they have, and I know nobody wants to take a day deduct. I mean, it's not we don't go into it thinking that we're going to not be at work, but life happens too, and when something major happens like that and you end up having to, it was just brought to my attention when they have been here and listened to the conversation on this. She did say that it was very helpful that they were able to spread it out over her 12-month checks so that she still was able to get small amounts and not have to have a full check that would be gone, not get, I mean, she would have probably a couple checks that she would get nothing in. I don't know.
I guess my feeling on that is that's probably a one-off, and I'm not sure that it's best to cater the language to a one-off. I think we're still dealing with human beings. There's probably nothing in the current agreement that makes that able to or not able to happen, and I would guess we would still communicate with people on that basis on a
Just like we're doing
one-on-one.
now, where it's spread out over a little bit of time and whatnot, but I also know that the sick leave bank, you know, should be available for those kinds of emergencies, if it's really a catastrophe.
If they choose to join the sick leave bank, that's the issue with the sick leave bank.
I
is-
can't imagine that this person didn't. I mean, I didn't ask those questions of them, but,
For the people that filled out the paperwork for their personal leave, this year, like hypothetically, if we did do this, I know I asked this before, because it takes a long time to save up those personal days. So if we rolled it over into next year and then we had PTO, what would happen? I think a lot would probably, if we did go this way, they would have rather cashed them in. You know what I mean? Than
I have-
roll them over.
I have
kind of
five, I
thing.
have 4 3/4 days right now that I banked for next year. What would happen to those days?
The way it's written, they'll roll into your 120.
And I don't have that because I'm already at 120.
So,
You're already at
I'm
120.
already
Yep,
at
I am
I'm already at
sick leave.
120.
I am
$100
too.
bucks a day.
That's really what it would end up being.
happen. You would
Yeah.
end up next year.
Yeah,
getting
but what
$100
about
a
But
day.
I,
this year's?
but I would
Correct it.
lose my 4 3/4 days that I have,
'Cause there's no
that I
way
That you
have.
just now rolled in.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, because right
That's
now,
what I mean
at the
for
end of this year, at the end of this year, I still have 4 3/4 personal days left.
So what you would want to do is be able to see if we could to have like a
Either-
grandfather clause where you could to have those rolled in and exceed the 120
Or-
during this
Or
transition.
to
Or-
exceed the 13,
And do
Because
what?
we're
or to
already-
exceed the 13.
We're already over 120.
Yeah, so we're at 120, we're topped.
You want to get
Yeah,
paid
because we
out.
don't want them
We
to
could
lose it.
either
Yeah.
paid out or roll them into
Say
the
it like
13.
it is.
Yeah, well,
13.
that's kind of, like, I think, because I already filled out
We
paperwork. I'm not
we
sure
would have
what
had the
that
option
is.
to get the $18 per hour, you know, on the sheet.
For this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you take the $18 this year? If we made it right for you this year? And
It would definitely make selling it out there much easier because there's a lot of us who've saved them for particular reasons.
why wouldn't we do that? Is there something that would prevent us from doing that? Because
Because-
right now you would have that option this year.
We've
but-
already
filled it.
signed
Oh,
it.
because
Yeah,
you've
that's-
already
we already
signed.
filled
We've
it out.
already signed that document saying, save them, we're rolling them over till next year.
Yep.
So we would have those days plus the 3 personal days.
I would have to check with payroll to see how hard it would be. Dr. Hawker, I don't have a problem with allowing them to reconsider how they chose to elect with their letter this year and do a one-time correction.
It's just unfortunate, right? The
The timing,
Obviously,
yeah.
it's always unfortunate to have to do something twice. But I don't know where we're at, I'm guessing that.
Your job to foresee this coming.
No,
I think we need to make it right. I don't think it's fair to make a change and
Okay.
then make that change punitive. I
That's-
don't think that would be fair.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that a lot, guys. We had a meeting with, and we discussed PTO, and we discussed a lot of the stuff that was with our members that were concerned or had questions about it. And we discussed, you know, the days, and you know, we had 12, and then you came to 13. And I think that's one of the contentions that, you know, losing 18 to 13 or 18 to 12 is quite a lot.
Sure.
And, you know, through that conversation, you know, especially with some of the younger teachers, it was, you know, we kind of came up on the day of 14 was what something that we could you know, sell, you know, the new teachers would only be losing three days. It would be the experienced teachers who would lose the 4, and they're the ones that already have the 120 days built up and so forth. You know, so I guess my counter would be to change 13 to 14,
Okay.
if that's agreeable.
Well, let me tell you the rationale behind the 13, as we try to move and stay consistent with treating everyone the same. Right now with our classified employees, we give them 1 day per month that they work, and then 3 days of personal. Well, if we looked at the teachers, August through May would be 10 months. 3 days of personal, and that would be 13, which would make us very consistent with the way we are treating all of our employees across the district. And I do feel like that's better than the 12 with coming up to the 13, but I think there's some merit to being consistent and treating all of our employees the same with the number of days. And so I guess my position, 13 is a good number, and would be in between 12 and 14. And it's a good
But it's
compromise.
quite a long ways from 18.
It is, without doubt, without a doubt.
So, that would be my recommendation. We go from 13 to 14.
And with 14, then you would prefer to go with the PTO route as proposed.
We would, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just looking at number 6. Members of the DEA negotiating team, school board's negotiating team will meet on a mutually exclusive date, whatever, to determine if the PTO replacement clause will be made a permanent change. If it is determined that it is not mutually acceptable, then we revert back. Okay.
That's my same.
I guess my question would be, and that's wonderful, gives us a year to try it. My question would be, if I read that, it's either it's this or we revert back. Do we need to put some wording in here on, there could be some discussion on making a
Fixing the
change,
problem.
yes.
Yes,
If there's,
Well, I think that's
because I
the
read that,
intent.
huh?
That's the intent.
I know,
Yeah, but the
but
language doesn't say
in there
that.
it just says,
What do you want to say?
well, I don't, because it says, if it's not gonna be a permanent change, it just goes back. So just something in there on, with an option to, well, in my words, tweak it,
Yeah.
because it might be something that, really is pretty decent, but with the, something here, something there. Just,
So to determine that the
That sounds
PTO is
good.
Not mutually acceptable, isn't that tweaking it?
Or,
But it's saying that we would just revert back to the leave language,
There would
but
be no middle ground.
they would.
there'd be no
Yeah.
middle ground to say that we want to change
that's
the
how I
leave
read it,
language.
and maybe
We don't
I'm
agree with the
certainly
leave
open
language.
Members of the
to-
DEA negotiations team and the social school board's negotiations team will meet on a mutually acceptable date prior to May 15th to determine the success of the PTO,
It's determined that the
to
PTO is
determine the
not
success of the
mutually
PTO
acceptable.
And make,
and make improvements if necessary. And then if it is determined that PTO is not mutually acceptable, the certified agreement will revert.
Certified agreement will revert,
To the 2018-19 work agreement.
but I don't agree
Could
with
we-
that either
No.
because
I know where you're going with it, yes. Go ahead.
there are things within the leave language that we currently have that we would like to discuss. That's why we put it on as one of our topics that we haven't really been able to put out there because we went to looking at PTO, which was your guys' topic. So if we take this and it doesn't work and we come back to the table, it needs to say that we aren't just gonna revert back to the language in the 1819 leave, that contract's
So you'd like
leave
to discuss
language.
what you proposed, what you initially proposed.
We would like to be able to
That's
have a
what you told-
discussion about
At that
time about
What
PTO
if-
or
Well, that would
changing
be
the
an
leave
What
language.
if we say, and I think May 15th is too late. I think, May 1st would be a better date, and my
Well, it
reasoning
says
behind.
prior to,
Right,
so it can
right.
be any day.
And I think my reasoning behind that is if we make the determination that we're going to revert back, then the teachers should have the ability to
okay, that's
to
fine.
to
Keith
roll.
had proposed April, but our challenge is simply, at the last quarter of the school year, there is, for various reasons, lots of activities, of course, as you very well know, just trying to pinpoint the challenge with the PTO program is that we're now moving away from defined days as sick leave and or personal to just days. And just making sure that at the end of the year, we have a good picture of what were the days that people used, what's that total? Whereas the current plan allows for really, just a couple, 3 personal leave days, so it's just different versus if they're just PTO days, a teacher could take off the week of the end of April, 1st of May, not that they would,
Right.
but right, they could, and that's the,
Could it be, could we say that, could we hold off on, I know that we talked about payment out, you know, if we can't bank them, we just pay. You know, we just pay it out.
Just bank them for a year.
Could we not bank them, but could we hold off until after we've made this decision, so that if we decide to revert back, somebody
We
can
don't
say,
lose the 4 days.
we can say, you know, we'd like to keep we'd like to roll 4 days or the 5 days over, so that we have those days still there. We bank those, just in case, because it takes a long time to get 4 or 5 days banked.
It does.
And so that way, you know, they would be able to do that.
I understand. I understand. What, not to ignore that, what if we use this language? Does this sound
Not the way
good
this is
for the
written,
first
though.
concern?
It says, if it's determined that PTO is
May
not
15th or May
acceptable,
1st, whatever date we want to
certified
come up
agreement
with.
will
May 15th is fine, as long
back
as
to
we can
that
hold
date.
off, you know.
If we can do, the negotiation team will meet
But it
on a
doesn't say
mutually
we don't
accepted
negotiate.
date prior to May 15th to review and revise as needed the PTO replacement clause. If
like
it is
that.
determined that the PTO, and then we will revert. Would that be
We will,
review and revise if needed the PTO replacement clause?
Yeah.
And then we go to that next line. If it's a no-go, we revert back.
right, and then we would have the ability to look at our language and make those adjustments for the personal leave. Okay,
Does that resolve that concern?
that concern's resolved.
Okay, now the 4 days.
Now the 13 versus 14.
I honestly, I can only speak for me, the team, the currently banked
Yeah,
personal leave,
but I don't think it works how we're doing it.
it makes sense. It really doesn't, logistically, there might be an issue with how do we keep track of what they are. I honestly don't think it's a simple spreadsheet if we just put everybody's name who's banking the day and we know that it's there, and then we pay you your $18 at the end of next year instead of the end of this year. That's acceptable. I'm okay with that. I don't think those bank days are a deal breaker. I think we can come up with something that's mutually agreeable. You've got them. They're either gonna roll into or we're gonna pay you out, whether we roll them into or pay them out next May or this May. I don't think it's a deal breaker for me. Whatever feels better or
Well,
is
I would assume that,
better
you
for
know,
you.
since they're this year's, they would be, we would probably want that this year, would be my,
Sure.
my feeling on that. So,
So either way, I don't feel strongly
and I
on
think
that
we
either
can
way.
make that happen. We can true that up this year as we transition into the new year. Anyway, yeah, it does kind of stink with what we've already done, a little bit of do-over, but that's the,
yeah, I
that's the
apologize.
details of,
How many days are we talking about?
well, that's the challenge. We don't know how many people have submitted the requests yet. I haven't even seen those.
And it would be
Sarah.
requests that come in like tomorrow, you know what I mean? It's like,
Well,
I
if
think
we
that-
had to send that letter out, I think we could probably agree that because of negotiations and changes in the leave, we're asking you to let us know what you want to do. There was 250 letters sent out. My guess is probably half of those will have to be sent out again, would be my
I would bet
guess.
that most of them would.
All 200, okay, so
Yeah,
we
my
could have
guess is that most of them
250
would. And-
adjustments.
do you think that's a good idea?
Well,
I'm sorry.
And we do have to ensure that everybody gets a letter too, because I know one person for sure didn't get a letter,
okay.
and that was me. Because everybody else had them, I was like going, oh, I don't get one.
You gotta check your mail.
No, I do check my mail.
You gotta update your
This is
address.
empty. Mine's the one you gotta worry about.
But, yeah, I mean, that would address that concern of having those.
I think we
So,
can work out the details on
Okay,
that.
let's go back to the 13 versus 14.
Okay. I feel like 13 is a very defensible, good, logical number. It treats everybody the same.
I honestly can say that it was pretty overwhelming with the almost 30 people that we had at our meeting the other day, that 13 won't go.
there was a document that I saw that also made us feel comfortable with the 13 as well, and I don't know where it came from, but where there was a request made about, is PTO a good idea, and to get some, and the response to that came back at 13 is a good number, a good solid number. Felt like that reinforced that 13 as well.
But if you take a look at the prototype that we looked at, there was that gradual step, and it didn't stop at 13.
Okay.
It continued 14 and 15, if I remember right.
I'd probably have to look at it again, but I know the 13 came out. So anyway, that's, as I said, I always speak. When I speak with for me and the mouse in my pocket.
Can we caucus?
We certainly can if you'd like to.
Let's caucus.
Would you like to?
Yep, I do.
Okay. We would like to go have that conversation on PTO real quick, and do you want to step back in there?
Yep, yep, that's good.
Do you want to take the cookies back with you?
No, but you want me to bring anything back with me?
No, I'm good.
Everything's in there.
I think this
I think
I
that's-
like the 1 year.
Can I
I don't even care, but I want to protect everyone, so I get it, I get it. But I mean,
I think that why would you say, Mr. Chair, just for the sake of the minutes, the sake of this meeting, I would like to present my, we would like to go with this program to at least introduce our people, so that when we come back to discuss it.
You already have it.
Oh,
So I think that's, I think, yeah.
and this is but I'm gonna wait until somebody says, I think this.
That's why I don't want this statement
No,
in
yeah,
there.
I like this, to review and
Yeah,
revise it.
right.
Because I think everything is good. Yeah, because I am not taking off my days. I'm thinking.
No. It's only if you, for the end of the year.
I'm already at 100.
No, you're not. I know. So anything that you don't use, yeah.
Yes,
So
I'm
if
already
you
at
have 13, and you're gonna get,
Well, I'm gonna use some of my different ones. I mean, like 100,000. This is where I got except for the days. Yeah, but
Right now, they get the same days we do 15 and 3. They get 15 and 3.
However, and they get 2 appointment days.
No, that's part of the 15. Because if you take a look, it says, because there's National Tuesday sick leave from the end of August.
Did they do that?
But they're not getting, so that was
And make sure, if you make an bargain with somebody, make sure that if it actually changes, that it goes back.
yes. It would have to come back.
I really like this. Less than what we had. But that was, this is more. I heard a number of people say 100.
Yeah, that was what we talked about.
And then, but I like the whole
We have that.
yeah. Because it's, if I don't.
That language is not clear up here though, the way he wrote this, that if you accumulate 120 and then you don't use it, you get paid for it. It's not clear. we intended or that we actually I can get 120 times $100.
Oh, see, I didn't read it like that, I guess.
Well,
Once you've
it's
accumulated
not
120 days.
Unused PTO transferred and added to the accumulated total of 120.
So maybe we just need to say
who have accumulated.
once employees, what about this?
PTO,
Once employees have accumulated 121 days,
120.
comma, they will be paid for unused
For
PTO.
that yearly unused PTO.
You got it. Yeah, it's not
Yearly
And then we
unused
don't
PTO.
want to do that.
Like this, right? Once employees have accumulated 121 days,
Well, they're talking, at the end of the year, we're still going to get that from what's already. Yeah, that's, you know, that's not the intent. That's not the intent.
No, but it's gonna be, well, that's why I wanted it to be.
I agree. Sarah, I Fine, I'll answer what's question.
So we have 15, and I looked them all up. I dropped 120 days. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, until it's not. Well, maybe not right now because right, it's not sick leave. But when it's gone, then I can take it down. So I can do this. That's great. Well, then that sounds good. That was just sick.
But anything that you don't, when you're at 120,
Then you get paid over that.
and you only use, next year, you only use 2 days, and you're left with 11, and you're gonna get paid out $100 per day you have left over.
It addressed all of the questions and concerns we have.
Except for the 40.
And they can't deny it. So if we can't.
That's way. That's.
But now she'll want to be able to work.
And we're not paid.
But you can take over
6
Everybody should have the opportunity to get their now or because I'm not because to me it makes
Before they come back, if they come back and say, "Oh, 14," give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Okay, what if they go 13?
That's what he deserves.
All right, okay, thank you.
Hang on, go.
So Jim, we would lose the 4 days that we have there.
No, they would reissue, if we go to this, my understanding, and I'll ask it again, is that they will reissue those sheets that we just signed, and then you will have the opportunity to take those hours and get paid the $18 per hour.
How many days can we get to sick?
So when roll
When you authorize your one, I'm sorry, hold on a sec. When you authorize for your sick bank, when you authorize the one, they will only take that one when it gets down to this number.
Oh, that's right.
If it doesn't get down to this number, they won't take it. You know, so when
So
you
when it
auth-
gets down, can we get more?
We will be asked for.
They'll ask.
They'll
yes,
ask
they'll
to
ask-
get there,
they'll
that's
ask
how
for
many
one.
there's in there, I know there's over 300 days.
Yes,
They-
they're gonna be
it's-
fine.
there's a
Okay,
lot.
somebody had a question back there.
Are they automatically rolling it over? Is that what you're saying?
They ought to, like, if you don't have, like, I have 100 days.
And you'll, whatever you have left over is automatically gonna go till
Into the
120.
PTO bank.
Yes.
In the PTO, not
Correct.
into
So
sick leave.
until you hit the 120, you will not have the option
We
for
better
payouts.
get clarification on
Yeah.
that.
I guess.
And if you
Yes.
currently have more than 120,
Is it all PTO or is it?
I asked that,
Okay.
no, I asked that and he said all PTO, but we will ask again.
We'll ask that
just to
again.
get-
And if happens to be sick leave,
My fear is they'll come in with a clause that there are no subs, so you can't leave.
that has to be negotiated. Chris, that has to be negotiated. That cannot just
So
happen.
Jim,
But that's what I'm saying, is our principal.
that's.
Right, I've been trying, and I have my ESP,
Jim.
they are going to do that from the
So
very
if at
beginning.
the end of the pilot,
But it's my
I
ESP.
don't want to be paid out my $18, what about at the end of the pilot, if this doesn't work, then I start at zero again on my personal leave?
No, I was gonna ask that question, and he did, you
Yeah,
did.
so if
He's
you
just gonna hold.
No, you're gonna get paid your $18 an hour right now if you want. If you want.
Yeah.
Okay? Next year, that's why I said you have to, we wanted to hold off until the end of the year, you know, to ask to whether we wanted to get paid or whatever, because, you know, we would have the option to say, if this doesn't fly, I want 5 days, I want my 5 days.
Yeah, I do, my
I
personal.
want my 5 days back.
I do too. I work good hard. Getting those sick time.
And this is,
And that's $144 a day.
I've been just to see if we let up.
I think it's a good route to go. It's a start.
Why would we have to sign a 20-year
I have it for you. So that it is in bracket.
That's not how it's supposed to work.
I always like to talk, so then. I know.
Oh, you didn't get a chance? I'm fine.
Longer than 2 hours? We have to make it. Did we all agree at the beginning that it's going to be
Oh, we went longer than last time.
just barely?
Are we close?
All right, let's call this meeting back to order after the school district had a recent caucus. Want to have a conversation about that, the PTO and the language there, and we'd like to kind of summarize that up, and we volunteered Mr. Harris to lead that conversation.
When we take a look at those number of days, again, we go back to why did this get proposed to be put on? We honestly thought that this could be a win-win for the district and for the teachers. We think that it's a better way to treat people to go with something like this. But in order for that to be a win-win, there needs to be a win for both sides. We're spending over $500,000 this year on substitutes. If we could cut that in half, that's the 1% to the base that was requested. If we go to 13 days, what that really does is we think that it gives the district the opportunity to potentially make a savings in that substitute, but it also, if you look at it, it gives the employees much more latitude to be treated as professional and as adults in how they use their time off. And so really what we're doing is we're not reducing the days, we're increasing from 2 to 3 personal days to 13 PTO days. And we think that that's a win. We think that 13 is a good number. We think it treats people fairly, and it's a number that we'd like to stay with.
You know, you talked about the aspect of the classified staff. How many of our classified staff have 4-year degrees?
I understand. Yeah.
I think we'd like to hand out our language.
Because the original intent a couple years ago when we first started talking about this was really to kind of try to take care of those people who had to take care of their children, had to take care of their parents. That was the original intent, and to try to simplify it a little bit, and we think we have something here that would simplify it.
There's nothing there.
That's all right.
I think we can easily.
Oh, did I not? Oh, did I get going? It really has been a week.
Oh,
Be a quick discussion.
that's right. Okay,
I like it,
Give
Jim.
that one to
Everyone else got one though?
She's
Right?
got one.
We'll share. We got it. We're good. Oh, here. Did you guys get one back there? Okay.
This takes our current language and cleans it up. In essence, creating the if my child's sick, I'm sick concept. You know, I guess I'd go back to your PTO language. I'm not opposed to taking that back to the group. But it was, like I said, pretty overwhelming.
I understand.
So, that's why I think that, you know, we would like to at least get this out here, and then we might have to go caucus yet too, and do some discussions as well.
So,
And basically, if you take a look and compare it, she has it all on here, when Sarah did this. It takes away the exception, because I don't think it's ever been used, to my knowledge. But basically, you know, the immediate family is taken care of, because if their immediate family is in a situation that's they're sick, or they're injured, or whatever, or dead, and having our teacher in the classroom isn't going to be the best for our students either, you know, if their mind is on something else. So they're able to take care of those people and then get back to the classroom for their kids fully charged, ready to go.
and then and this would be the only changes you would propose, and then leave all of the personal language as is. In
Everything else would remain as is, yes. And then we'd have to make the determination a bit on the sunset clause, you know, either this year or next year. Because I'm not saying we don't like the PTO language, because it's very attractive. It truly is.
Mr. Harris, do you have the wording for the modification in the personal leave if the PTO was not agreeable?
To eliminate the sunset clause and
Yes.
pilot language?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Let's add that to this conversation as well.
Okay.
I think it's very relevant.
Okay.
I would agree.
You want me to hand that out?
Yes, please.
We're glad you're taking care of her.
So in the event that that PTO, we don't go down that road, if that's the will, then this also would help address what you're talking about with the sick leave, and also the sunset clause, and roll all of that into there. So we've prepared that language as well, making sure that we've even included the what was it called? The pilot leave language that was in place, went ahead and implemented that into this wordage there, so that also could be, you know, continued on. I think that was a successful pilot this last year. So that's the wording of item A, is just simply adding that into there, and reducing the 1/4 day down to the hour and a half, you know, that part that worked. As then, as well as if the personal leave is not used, it will be added to the accumulated sick leave, or the accumulated personal leave up to a maximum of 48 hours at the end of the contract years. And if you've accumulated those hours, then you're paid out an amount equal to the substitute pay. Very, very similar, right, with the current language, Jim?
Yep, that's very, very similar. The only difference would be that if they were in that 3-day allotment,
Yes.
they would only be allowed to carry the 40 maximum.
Okay.
Because, you know, we are only allowed the 8 days total, cumulative to 8 days. So if they were in that 3-day allotment period after year 11, then they would only be able to carry over 5 days, 40 hours. I know it says up to a maximum of 48 hours.
So that's in there, but it's not listing it.
Yeah,
So maybe
yeah.
we need to list it.
It's a little vague, saying, okay, I have 48 plus 3, so I'd be at 9, even though up top it says 8. So maybe up to the maximum number of hours allowed for that, for their tenure.
Well, do we just want to change the 48 to what's accurate, so it's 8, so it'd be 64?
No,
No.
it's both. It's what Jim is saying, it's really 40 or 48.
Depending upon their
where
tenure
you're at.
in the tenure in the district.
We
yeah.
covered that, we thought we covered it by putting a maximum of 48, but it just doesn't, it could be a little confusing, so.
We just say up to a maximum of 40 or 48 hours.
Depending upon
depending
tenure.
on years of experience. Something on that line.
I also think you need to put in their district years of experience. Because this was added as a kind of helping to retain teachers in our district, you know. It was the number of years they had in our district before they got their 3. So if somebody comes in at 15, they're not automatically gonna get 3 days. Does that make sense?
Yep. Does that make sense, Keith, as HR? So let's I guess make a note of specific language that you like. To be accumulated personal leave up to a maximum of 40 or 48 hours.
Depending on years of experience depending on years of DPS experience? That
Yeah, or
work?
as determined by DPS experience.
I wasn't paying
Jim's
attention,
like,
sorry.
okay, oh,
Okay,
Yeah.
maximum of 40/48 hours depending
Yes.
on years of DPS experience.
Perfect,
Yep.
perfect.
And then the second sentence, teachers who have accumulated 48 hours of personal leave will be paid out. Is that 48 the correct number there?
It's gotta be 40 or
40 or 48.
It's got to be 40 or 48
Right.
again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I would ask if you have any questions on what we proposed here, and I think that we would like to take a quick caucus to talk amongst ourselves.
Can I get some
I think it's pretty
clarification
clear.
before we
Yes, go ahead.
caucus? Okay, on PTO, just wrapping my head around a few things. If a teacher has banked 5 years of personal leave as of right now, and we do this pilot for 1 year, and let's say we decide to do the PTO, and they have that personal leave paid out. Then we come back and decide we aren't going to go PTO, we're going to go back to sick leave after a year. Will they get to take back their banked 5 days?
I think that's what Jim was asking earlier, and I don't think we had the exact details, but we are willing to work with, give people the option. If you want to hold on to those, whether you choose to get paid out now or hold on to them to see how the pilot works out, get paid out at the end of next year. I think we could come up with something.
So if they get paid out this year,
They wouldn't
they
get
wouldn't get them back next year.
unless they
Unless-
wanted to pay us back.
Or unless, if you had more than 13 days?
If you had
So
13
let's
days
say
left.
Say I had 8 days left at the end of next year of the PTO. Could I take 5 of those and put them back into personal?
That would be another way to reimburse, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay,
I
all right.
wouldn't, I think we could work
I think so,
those
too.
details out. I think where there's I can understand the fear of those 5 days, and where this is a pilot, I understand the uncertainty of what's gonna happen to those. I really think we could work something out that would be that could protect those days and the interest of those days. I really do, but,
They just take so long to acquire, you know,
oh,
to save
I
up.
understand why they are valuable.
Very much so.
I do, so absolutely, so.
Do you have any-
But,
And then, just so we're clear, if I have 120 sick days right now, those 120 are going to roll into 120 PTO days.
that's correct.
Okay.
And if you have the 120, that's
That's
the
what-
line that says, if you save your 13
For next year.
For
for
next
next
year.
year, you potentially could get a $1,300 bonus to go into the summer each year
Right.
after you've
Because
banked
you'd rather
that.
have us in our classrooms
that,
than
again,
out of it.
We get the win for having you in the classroom, and it recognizes, Jim, you said you were losing. You were use or lose situation because you banked that. Well, I don't think we're respecting people like you. It's not fair that we get you into that situation, then start telling you to lose or use or lose. This way we continue to incentivize and reward
I agree.
you for being in the classroom where we want you to be and the kids need you to be, so.
All right.
So, but if it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea.
No, we just
No, no.
needed, I
Just
just
wants to-
needed to make sure I was clear on those points, just,
Yes. I think, one change on your PTO, that, and it doesn't change anything, it just, I think clarifies. You know, it doesn't change, the intent is there, but I don't think it specifically says it. You know, up in number 1, it states employees who have accumulated 100 days will be paid for unused PTO at the rate of $100 per day. And if I read that as somebody who has not been at this negotiations table, I'm reading it, I get $100 a day for 120 days.
Right. Of the,
of the current years.
Sorry, I know.
It does make
So
it seem like
maybe
it would
maybe
be
we
all
say
100.
employees who have accumulated the 120 days, bank days, will be paid for unused, the yearly that year's unused PTO,
that
Current
year's,
years, the current years.
or current year's
The
PTO.
current year's unused
PTO at the
PTO.
rate of $100 per day.
that is certainly the intention of it.
Right, absolutely, but I'm just looking out for somebody in 2 or 3 years, because I think this could be successful in 2 or 3 years, going, hey, that's like $12,000.
Good suggestion.
That's a
Cha-ching!
Just
good
want
catch.
to clarify something else. A person couldn't be denied use of this if it were for actual sick leave. I mean, like,
Sure.
you know what I mean?
It would be the same, the intent would be, if you wake up and you started throwing up at 2 o'clock in the morning, please don't come to work. You're gonna call in sick. But if you were saying, you know, we wanna,
I don't feel like going
do
in today, I want to
something.
go shopping.
yeah. And,
That's
and the principal said, you know what, I can't cover your class. 13 people wanted to go shopping today. Or, I'm sorry, we can't let everybody go on
Try
Black
to
Friday
keep
or
plenty.
something.
We'll get that
We
out
would
anyway.
want to, well, I know, but we, hopefully, there would be some mutually agreeable
Courtesy.
way,
It would be
courtesy.
courtesy.
Professional
It
courtesy
would be
that says, you know
courtesy.
what?
Here's the problem that I see with that, is that we don't talk to our principals. I put it on ASOP.
Yeah,
I never speak to a person
yep.
if I'm sick or.
So I guess I
It would
would be
be-
very interested in having some conversation about what language can we have in there so that both needs are met. The teachers needs, that when they're sick and need to take a day, you're sick and need to take a day. But also the administrators needs to say, you know what, I need to staff a school. So is there a way to, right now it's left unsaid? Is there some language that could
Professional
be put
courtesy is
in
what
there?
it is. I don't think there is language that can be put in there, because it would, here's what I see happening right now, and number one, I see there's a lack of subs. And somehow we have to figure out how to deal with that. And that, I don't have a clue. I mean, I wish I did. I wish I had a magic wand that said we have plenty. But right now, it's not uncommon for a sub to pick up my day. You know, I haven't gone for a track meet, I'm gone all day, they pick it up right away, done. Then, Michelle's a teacher, she calls Mr. Harris and says, you know, I'm gonna be gone tomorrow, will you sub for me? You know, you do such a great job in the class, you guys are friends, and he says, yeah, I'll do that. You know, give me a second, I click off him, click on her, done. Now I don't have a sub anymore.
Right.
And that happens, and you guys would not believe how many times that happens.
We've talked
I
about
do
that.
know
We
that.
can fix that.
Yep.
There are some avenues within ASOP that allows for us to put some constraints on a substitute dropping an assignment that they already have. We need to consider that and look at that. You're spot on. There's a ton of challenges that we have with subs across the whole district. And we feel like, in part, that's why we brought the PTO conversation, because we're hoping to bribe some of our teachers to not be gone.
But if that happened to you and you had to go see a specialist and you had to make that appointment 6 months out, at some point you need to be able to say to the principal, I wish I could be there,
Right.
but I can't wait 6 more months to see my doctor.
Exactly.
Or the
that
tickets
is-
are already bought.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
understand.
you'd be surprised, and maybe you guys have looked at this and wouldn't be surprised, but it does happen. And it's unfortunate, you know, especially for our dang administrative assistants. You know, I think of Nikki and at the high school and what she goes through some mornings. It's hard for her, you know, to try and piece together subs.
Well, and I think it's an excellent question. We've had that conversation. In fact, it was one of the conversations we had was, is this even worth bringing out? Or is that become, and like you said, a professional courtesy? If we could walk away from here the saying that you're gonna provide professional courtesy, we're gonna provide professional, and we're just gonna agree that we're gonna make that as a team. We're gonna make that work to the best of our ability, and the administrators won't be stinkers and the teachers won't be stinkers, and we're gonna make it work whenever we can, knowing that there's always gonna be something come up. But I'm very open to language if we can make some assurance there. That's a win-win.
I do have a question. So when can I dip into my 120 days?
When you need it. Same as now. You know, you bank those 120 days, you know, hopefully you get paid out when you leave the district and you never ever had to use them. But if you got in a car wreck and you needed, and you didn't join sick bank and you needed those 120 days, they're there for you to use.
Perfect.
They're there for you to use.
I just know some of our people are very concerned about this because they have been told in their building that they are not allowed to go unless they find their own sub. So they've been denied because there was no sub.
Yeah. And like I
And so
say, if
this
this
is a hard-
is a bad idea,
But that's
this
even
is good
with
language. I
our
think
current,
this
so,
kind of addresses the same thing that was the emphasis behind this. So if this is a better way to go, let's have a conversation on this. I'm okay with that.
Well, we'd like to caucus for a few minutes, but we would like you guys to leave. And not that I don't like you, but I want to be able to talk to these people here while we're here, rather than having to call a meeting to get them here. Not that I don't like you guys.
Nothing personal, I know.
Oh, ASAP, you're exactly right. I don't need to tell my principal every, they get that message. We don't, we just do ASAP, so.
And we should do it in forms too.
Yes. We just do ASAP, but I know. It's just ASAP.
I'm not Twyla to it because it's hers.
No.
This one here is hers, this one's ours.
But I do worry about his comment of professional courtesy, because I understand what he's saying, but
Probably.
we just set aside, they can't say, anyway, go ahead. No. Okay.
All right.
Why don't they have to cave on anything?
I still think the PTO in the long run is a win. I still do. I'm sorry. It just, because it's been such a headache, the language. And if they stick by,
All right, here's what I see. If we say sick leave, it says, it gives us the ability to have all current and available sick leave may be used for accidents, illness, or death involving teachers or spouses, immediate family. We would not be able to dip into our bank, but that year's sick leave, up to 15 days, could be used for you, your family, whatever. We also, you know, granted, we haven't really talked about this yet, but a maximum of 5 days of current sick leave may be used for accidents, illness, death, but non-immediate family.
The way you have it written, all current and available. All current and available, that 120 is still available. So if they go with this, it's written there. So don't say that.
I did write it on purpose.
And stop it. Go there.
Good one, all right. Okay, let's go back to this. The reason why that I wanted them to leave is I want you guys, I want your input on this. Is this a experiment that we want to test? This would be the PTO. Is PTO an experiment for 1 year that we want to test? Yes or no?
test and then go back to this language.
As long as they can't backdoor us and shut it off, it's like too many people wanna go shopping, like that was not.
That's the reason they would probably wanna visit it again, that sunset clause is as much for them.
Yes, it's a
Because
protection
that's
for
my
them.
concern, is they're like,
They're
oh, too
hoping
many
that
people
none
are
of us use
shopping.
it, and they are paying us out $1,000 check.
Because they'll save money because they don't,
They don't have to pay the sub.
they don't pay the
That's what they're
$1,000.
really
Paying us
hoping
100
for.
versus 137.
Yeah. And they're 7.65%. Right.
So they can't shut off our leave just because they made an error with it.
Not until next year. After the negotiators, after the negotiators from both sides come together to visit
And talk about it.
Only then, after next year, will they be able to say, we want to go back.
Either side can say that.
Either side.
It's gotta be mutual. It has to be mutually acceptable. If it's one side or the other,
Both sides have to agree to go back.
correct.
Correct.
No, both sides have to agree to keep the PTO. If one side or the other wants to go back, it goes back.
And it's not contingent upon sub availability. for
There is
sub count.
nothing in here that says contingent upon sub availability.
Or being
And
denied.
or being
Or
not.
being
Here's-
From what was originally.
But ours says that right now
By the
too.
principal.
But ours says that,
That's what it currently says. That's what it currently says.
Currently says it.
The black is what's already
Yeah.
there.
They left everything in black.
I think that's why our principal thinks that she can say whether we get to go or not.
But this one doesn't say that.
No.
Theirs does not say
Thir-
that.
So,
13 days, yes or no? Yes, if you can give me a hand, if you guys are over 13 days, try it, raise your hand.
Try it.
None.
all right,
So
let's do it.
we're gonna accept it.
That's 133.
Yes, it is.
Yes, Wendy?
Do we have to tell them why we're gone?
No, PTO, you do not.
That's what my understanding
Don't differentiate.
So no more on ASAP, we have to type in a reason why, because.
A lot of our teachers write in HIPAA.
They sure like to throw that at us, don't they? Should we not throw that? We've introduced this, so if this doesn't work, this has been introduced, it's on record.
Yes.
It's on record, so that's why we did this.
We don't agree to it after 1 year.
I like
Please
that.
go
Good
back
idea.
and start over.
Go ahead, 7:30.
13 days accumulative to 120 days, so 120 plus 13 at the beginning of the next year.
Correct.
Right.
133.
You start the year with 130,
Right.
and
That's how I
every
read it.
year.
That's why I asked him when can we get into this.
Yes. Okay.
You're gonna hang
Where have you
on.
been? Where have you been? You're gonna get the damn sheet back to say I want $18 per hour.
Yes.
Or you're gonna tell them, I want you to hold these in case it doesn't work. And if it does work, I want them back next year. Or you're gonna say, pay me next year, $18 an hour.
We're gonna make sure you write that on. Did you not hear me ask those questions just for you? You did a great job. You guys are doing great.
Gee, I wonder what would happen.
And then last Friday, I was
Can I say it?
Yes, make sure they do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can say.
So, where is the recorder?
Oops, that's not ours.
You put it over there.
Wrap this puppy up.
Use my reach.
Wait a second.
Come on.
It's 2 hours already.
I know.
All right.
I never shut it off.
All right, we'll come back after, I've lost track of how many caucuses.
Yeah.
3.
So,
Okay, thank you,
you bet.
Mr. Chair. We've had a chance to look over the PTO language, and we agree that, you know, the best place for us as teachers is in the classroom with our students. And now that you've answered our several questions about our accumulated sick leave, not being able to be denied leave if you are sick, or if a sub were to drop you after you've had them picked up, you know, they had picked up your leave and you have tickets bought, things like that, that have been questions that were concerning to us. We do feel that we could agree upon this language at 13 days, and that we would come back. It would be a 1-year pilot, and we would come back and discuss it. The changes that would need to be made is that it would not be, if it is determined that the PTO is not mutually accepted, the certified agreement will revert to the 2018-19 work agreement. That part would be taken out, because we would need to come back and totally discuss, because we've given you our language that is different than what our 2018-19 work agreement states. So we would like it just to be that we would come back as a group to revisit and review, and then
Shauna, I don't think that's even possible.
we can't come
Because
back and review.
We have to have something to revert back to. We can't, because if we say, if there's nothing to revert back to, there's nothing there.
So we revert back to that and we leave it at that?
No, it doesn't, no.
And then continue
And then continue
conversation.
conversations,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
But we are
just
gonna
can't-
have a
we can't get rid
conversation,
of
we
it
don't
because
just go
there's
back to
nothing
that
go back to.
language. Okay,
So we can have
as
the
long as we have the
discussions.
discussion and we go back to it, but we don't just go with that language.
And that's part of the reason why we brought our language out, is for that. But yeah, we have to have something to revert back to.
But you'll probably want to, I think we need to meet sooner than May, I mean,
Maybe
as
May
soon as
1st or
possible.
something.
In that end of the
Prior
year.
to May 15th.
Just because it
And
could
I can
take a
understand
while.
that would give you an idea of subs used in May as well. Because that would be towards the end of golf
Yeah.
season, towards the end of track season, would be an idea
May
of
1st.
number of subs.
So then.
So leave it at May 15th.
Exactly.
Because it says prior to.
Prior
so,
to, yes.
You know,
But-
you could have the initial conversation in May you know, on May 1st, or even April 15th if you really wanted to, and start the process. Here's where it's been, let's meet again in a couple weeks to see how it's gone more. I mean, you could do that, you know, I don't think you'd sit down and do it in one meeting.
No.
Go ahead.
We did tentatively have that wording in there on having discussions, correct?
Yeah.
Where,
Revise and.
Yeah.
Review and revise.
Yeah.
so that's,
Yep.
yeah, right. I thought,
I was gonna say, there were some word changes in that
Right.
we had talked
Right.
about.
I didn't write that. Also, one other thing that no matter what happens after next year, you know, whether as the group, they decide to stay with this or to revert and revise, this would have to be re-ratified by the DEA, you know, because it would be,
The 1 year.
you know, it would be beyond the scope of what is. So just so you know that, you know, we would still have to re-ratify this.
And that
And-
ratification would come from the additional changes that might be
Right.
made
Yes.
Right.
at that juncture.
Yeah, either additional changes or just going back to them and saying
In the
it's going to stay
event
the
you
same.
didn't ratify that, then that's why you've got to have something to fall back on. It would fall back to what's in place today.
Correct. And it would not affect anything else within that negotiated agreement other than this.
Yep. Okay, I think that's,
Is that it?
I think that is good. Let's just make sure we've got the wording right so we can get that typed up and get an agreement prepared. Okay, so what I have is the 13 days is agreeable. We're gonna modify in number 1 and put current year in front of unused PTO so that that's more clear to our employees. And then down in number 6, we'll clarify a date prior to May 15th, 2020. And then we need to add some language, and I'm open to any suggestions, that does add the review and revise conversation. We clearly have it that it'll revert back to the 1819 work agreement language. And then we need to add another sentence there of some sort that says that this negotiation team will then
Mr. Harris, didn't you have something? I thought you
Yeah,
read
what I
us
put
something.
on, acceptable date prior to May 15th to review and revise as needed. The PTO replacement clause, period. Is kind of what I had suggested.
Okay, so that says that you're gonna
says it, yeah.
review and
Yep.
revise
Perfect.
at
Yeah.
that juncture.
Perfect.
Okay. Keith, don't lose that.
You know I lose it now.
Yeah, will you keep
The
it?
pressure, the pressure is on.
I think Twyla's got that captured.
You have to repeat it if you want me.
We've got it.
I've got it.
I think he's got it, and Michelle's got his back, so I think we're okay. And yes, Jim, I know we've gone past our 2
I was just
hours.
going to say, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
I would suggest that as long as we are on a roll here, we extend for another half hour so we can hopefully finish this and be done.
Is that okay with everybody at the table?
Yep.
Okay, that is agreeable as well, so,
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
G, maintenance of standards clause, we'd like to move that.
That is simple.
What? I didn't hear you.
Remove it.
We'll move it.
I didn't, and with G?
G, maintenance standards clause,
Okay.
that is just fine. Let's talk real quick on item F with the placement on the salary schedule.
Did you want me to?
I got mine.
Do you have extras?
Mine's out.
I think you've got, you beat you,
I know, it's
not
true.
colored. It's all good.
It's true.
Did you? let me keep that.
Did you give one?
I did not give one to her.
Here's
And if there's any
extras.
extras.
I got a bunch of
No, my daughter has awards.
What I did with this when I sat down and prepared it after our conversation last meeting was I kind of divided it out so that you had vocationally certified teachers and first profession teachers in 2 different lines. So that was not, they were not intermixed in the same category. So I would just say teachers new to DPS may be given credit on the salary schedule for years of teaching experience following receipt of college baccalaureate degree up to including 15 years. Didn't change. That stays exactly the same. Vocationally certified teachers. Here's where there are some changes that are made. Vocationally certified teachers new to DPS and have not been employed by DPS in the past 2 contract periods may be given up to 6 years on the salary schedule. And that could be a moot point with the 2 contract periods. We just don't want somebody to quit and try to be rehired for better benefits or better
Placement.
Okay, yep.
And then we have may give up 6 years on the salary schedule for the appropriate CT endorsements, as I said. Then B was vocational certified teachers will be allowed no more than 16 credits for horizontal movement on the salary schedule. And I think that what we probably should say is 16 continuing education graduate credits. Maybe that would be more, that's in the lines of what all of our teachers take over the summers. And then to achieve BS 24 or beyond, any credits over 16 must be towards a baccalaureate degree in the vocational field.
Okay, well, just a couple of questions. I appreciate you sending this to me in advance, and that gave me a chance to kind of look it over. The 6 years, I know we had conversations about 7 previously, so we can just have that conversation. I think
we're not opposed to going to 7.
Okay, thank you for that. I think the biggest question that I have is related to item B under number 2.
Okay.
The way I read this, help me if I'm reading it wrong, if we were to hire a teacher, let's say they're a welding teacher or something, and that's who we bring in and they're now teaching welding. The way I read this, the only chance they would have for advancement on the salary schedule would be to take classes that are related to their field of welding, and that may not be exactly the classes a welding instructor, we may not so much care about the welding piece. We may care more about the pedagogy of teaching piece,
okay,
which would not be a course that would be associated with their discipline.
They would be allowed 16 credits of pedagogy, kind of like what we have today. We want to encourage them to go on for their baccalaureate, is what we're trying to encourage
What if they already have one?
in their vocational field. So if
So
they're,
let's say an accountant decided to become a welder, and they went out and put the years into being a welder, and now it went through the alternate certification process.
that would not fulfill this requirement, because it would be like I had a conversation with somebody who has a master's degree right now who's not on the master's program, or not in our master's side, because their master's degree is not in education.
So okay, well that's just a whole different conversation.
That is a whole different conversation.
So a new hire with a master's in
Public administration, for instance.
public administration would not be placed on the master's salary schedule?
That's according to the person I talked to. She is not. No. She
See,
did
I
not
learn
receive.
things new every time.
She did not receive. She did not receive any credit for that master's program when she came on board.
So explain, just help me understand, because I'm confused. You guys have a vision of what you intend by this. Your intention for the last sentence, what does that look like?
We want them to be able to move over. We want them to be able to advance.
Horizontally, you want them to be able to
Right.
change lanes.
Go BS 0 to BS 8 to BS 16. And we know that within the vocational certification program that a lot of the classes they are taking are, correct me if I'm wrong, baccalaureate type classes. Would that be correct, Lyle or Maggie?
Maggie would be the one to ask.
For the bachelor's degree for CTE teaching to Valley City State, after transition to teaching, there's 24 credits that Valley City offers outside of the general ed
classes that everybody takes that are specific for your CTE bachelor's teaching degree.
There you go.
So if you take those 24, there's 36, but 12 of them are transition to teaching.
So there's 12 right there that they're going to have.
But
So,
you have to do transition to teaching on your provisional, so those cannot be used for a lane change. Because in order to get off of your provisional, you have to take those 12 credits.
where does that say that in our negotiated agreement?
You, one of them.
Is it, I mean, I guess I would have to.
You have to be off of
I'll-
your provisional
Let me go back
for
here.
any continuing education credits to count for the lane change. And you have to take transition teaching to get off your provisional.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me, as we all delve into this.
Yeah, so number 2 under A2. I think is what she's referring to, the last sentence there.
Yeah, all vocational teachers, only those credits earned after being fully certified for vocational instruction will be counted, which is item 2A2 on page 6.
All right. So, and then
There's
you say
24.
there's 24 after that. So, if we 32, well, if we gave them the 16, they would only need to have 16 of those 24 to be at BS 32.
Okay, so what would happen, and I'm sorry, I don't understand, so this is a sincere, what would happen if they took a course at DSU, reading within the content area? Would that class count?
Not according to this, no, because it's not within the vocational field or CTE field.
Would it make sense that a class like that could count if it was I guess that was my question on it, is they go out and they take a class at DSU on differentiating instruction.
As long as it's a
reading within the
3-credit
content area, those types of things.
Would not that count, one of that class should count for one of those 16?
Yes, I mean, as long as it's not the summer 1 credit graduate class, that would would have to be an undergrad baccalaureate class. So 3 credits, whatever. Yeah, I would agree with that.
It would count.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time it wouldn't count?
Underwater basket weaving.
No, is there ever a time, not that class, is there ever a time with this, the way you're writing this, just, is there ever a time reading within the content area wouldn't count towards advancing lanes?
If you exceeded the 16, then it wouldn't count.
Does that bother you at all? Is that a challenge to you? That
Well,
we would ever have a time when that type of a class wouldn't count?
No, I mean, I don't think, I think that as long as it is a part of an accredited baccalaureate program, you know, an undergrad program, we just don't want them to, that sounds bad, you know, we want them to be becoming better teachers, yes, becoming more qualified teachers, getting that baccalaureate so that they're on even par with the first profession teachers. You know, they have skills, there's no questions about that, and we want to reward them with their 7 years, but we want them to become baccalaureate, you know, instructors. We want them to become better instructors. So if reading the content area, I don't know how much reading they do in welding, but you never know.
Well, if they're not, we need to have a conversation with whoever's,
I don't know, I've never welded.
because they better be,
So,
right?
But, you know, I'm just, you know, the whole content, you know, if as long as it's part of a bachelor's program,
That was my questions and concerns, is would we ever have a time when we were not recognizing somebody's, if we were keeping somebody from being able to move horizontally across lanes, but they were doing what they could to become a better teacher. they were taking those courses to improve in their strategies, their pedagogy, their, and they're becoming a better teacher. Would there
about
ever be a
this?
time
How
where
about-
this would?
How about what we said no more than 16 credits, because most of the classes in the summer are grad credits. They're Ed 600s. And Maggie, I'm gonna ask you this question because you've taken some of those.
Yep.
Are they considered grad classes for you as well, or are they still at 600 or whatever it happens to be? Are they an undergrad class?
I'm confused on which classes you're referring to.
What any type of 1 credit class you would take at the West River Teaching Center?
Oh, are they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't count towards my Valley City degree.
Well, how do you propose we write it?
Well, I
have
think
no
the biggest
idea.
question that I just have, again, it's the bachelor's degree in their vocational field. I'm not sure of all the futuristic, vocational positions we may have. Is there a bachelor's degree in all vocational fields?
Or the CTE, like she's referring to, because I think that's a generic CTE degree, is it not? It's not specific to drafting.
No, it's a CTE baccalaureate teaching degree.
Or working towards the CTE baccalaureate teaching degree, which would make them better teachers.
Right, and is that degree offered lots of places or only at Valley City
As
or?
far as I know, it's
In
only
the Valley City right now.
Because Valley City is the only one that does transition to teaching for vocational teachers.
I can't imagine, say, a very well used. I mean, how many transitional teachers do we have going in?
When I went in 2 years ago, we had 30 that go through transition to teaching, but it's different in every school district as far as what credits are counted and which school districts require the baccalaureate and which districts pay for the baccalaureate. It's very broad as to all the requirements. But everybody's required by the state for transition to teaching.
And I know I'm the slow reader at the table. Help me again, the intention behind B was
To encourage them to get their baccalaureate degree.
to encourage them to get their bachelor's degree.
We can take B out.
Could I propose that we eliminate B?
I mean, well, or we just go back to the way the language is right now. I mean, that obviously that limits 4 years again, but because currently right now that stipulation is not there.
Right. And I know I'm going, because I asked you earlier, okay, is that a one-off? I'm probably talking about a one-off as well. Sure I am, so. But I just would be really hesitant to ever put something in place where we would potentially not reward somebody for trying to improve in their teaching skills and their.
They must have a bachelor's. In order to get into that vertical lane.
I agree.
Yeah, 32. Okay.
In order
I agree.
to move past,
In order
to
to
get into BS plus 32, I'm just throwing something out there.
I would agree with that. In order to get into BS plus 32, they would have to have
A
a bachelor's degree.
And maybe we just get rid of the in the vocational field. Could you get a bachelor's degree in something related to your vocation, but it's not in your vocation?
I could live with that. I could live
Okay.
with that.
All right, so then the wording that potentially could be presented would be to achieve BS plus 32 or beyond, credits must be towards a baccalaureate degree.
They must.
No,
have
they
a-
must
have
have
a
their
bachelor's
bachelor's to
degree.
enter BS 32.
So it would
So-
give them up to 24, it would give them to 20.
They would be able
Okay.
to make it through
So to
24.
achieve BS plus 32 or beyond, a bachelor's degree, an earned bachelor's degree or earned baccalaureate degree must
Be attained.
be attained.
Okay. To achieve BS 32 or beyond.
Well, BS plus 32 is our top BS, so.
A baccalaureate degree.
Must be attained.
Okay, or if we did English, to achieve BS plus 32 or beyond.
We
The
don't
teacher
need-
must.
You don't need
we don't have
beyond.
to- Yeah, because if
There's
you
nothing
do
after
an MS, you
that. They'd have to have a master's to
Yeah.
do anything else.
I see.
So BS 32 is our top,
Okay. To
So
get
get-
that, they have to achieve a bachelor's degree.
and that would give them 24, that would give them lots of movement opportunities.
So if they wanted, we would never punish somebody for taking a pedagogy class. Person.
I can live with that.
And it would be agreed that in A, we could change
We
6
could-
to 7.
We could change 6 to 7.
Okay, sounds like we have an agreement then on placement on salary schedule, item F.
Done.
Thank you, thank you.
We did change 6 to 7?
Yes.
Okay, let's move on here real quick. There's just a few items left. Let's discuss the safe workplace language. I'd like to begin that conversation if that's all right. Spend a little bit of time looking at several of those referenced policies that we previously addressed that I believe is the best place to fix our safe workplace language. And there's no question that some of those, even the administrative reg policy, I even found a scenario where there's supposed to be some samples listed and there's none listed. It just says list and there's none listed. So my proposal would be that we would over the next, I'll have 2 administrative council meetings over the summer months, June and August. We won't meet in July, but we would go through those policies together as an admin team to help address the concern in regards to different maybe practices, administrative regs happening in each building, and help build that up and make that more consistent across the district. And then I would propose that sometime early fall, I'll convene a task force, a committee, call it whatever we want to call it, and we'll have some representation from the various groups on there to go through each one of those 7, I believe I referenced 7 policies in there, and determine if there's things in there that are blatantly missing, if there's things in there that would help our teachers feel better addressed. I think that would be great. You mentioned that there was some concerns that sometimes we bombard our new teachers at the start of the year with a whole bunch of policies and whatever, and then maybe halfway through the year they don't know them, they maybe missed them or whatever. We understand that as well. We think this last year we went kind of more to an online digital reference, I guess, to many of our policies, and these specific 7 policies, or maybe if the committee recommends 5 of the 7 or something, be also additional focus points. We could add that to that list as well, so that throughout the year there's just a better reference to any new employees. We'll also be able to include that in our onboarding practices as well, and be able to address this through policy, so that it can be more of a live, living document as the needs are generated and as we move forward, and our board can make those adjustments as necessary. So I will pause there and listen to your thoughts.
I think, Mr. Chair, that is a step in the right direction, and understanding, that you've already put into place the mental health task force, and that not all of our issues in our classrooms are directly related to mental health, and some of them are behavioral having a task force to look at that is very important. And to really make sure that we have special ed, general ed, elementary school, middle school, and high school teachers on there, because I think that what they're facing in the high school is far different than what they're facing in the elementary school. And so we need to have a good representation from all levels, and including administration, because I think one of the things that might be lacking, with administrative regs is what the trained administrators are getting, and when they come in, if they are, because that was when they come in with those credentials, you assume, and sometimes you can't. So that we get everybody, administrators trained, we get school teachers trained, and we all know where we're at. So I think a task force is a good way to go with representation from all levels.
And we will absolutely do that. We felt like we had a great participation and involvement with the mental health task force this year. So I'm very confident we can do that same scenario with a different group of folks.
And hopefully get that accomplished at the beginning
Yes,
of this school year?
Yes. The first and foremost intent would be to align our administrative regs, and that's what we'll review in the June and August board meeting, so that we do start fresh. And then yes, we'll call for that task force probably early September. Usually we don't kick off, everybody's busy in October or in August when we come back, but we would start that task force in September and take it from there. The mental health task force, for instance, I kind of had an initial plan that would wrap up probably February or so, but there was such great work going on. It really took us through the end of April, early May to wrap that up, to create our toolkits, or to identify the toolkits that need to be created. So I don't want to set a premature deadline on this work, but it's going to be, that's going to weave, I think, very closely in with the mental health task force unit anyway, and that will just help us create a better path forward for the whole year.
Thank you. I think we are definitely moving in the right direction when it comes to safety. And I really liked what you said when you talked about consistency within the buildings too, especially. I think that not only helps administrators, it helps teachers and students as well.
And the students.
For sure.
Okay, thank you. So any other conversation then about that?
We thank you for listening and hearing our concerns and hearing what our teachers are going through, and we thank you for your support as well. With what you said that very first night that we did that, because hearing a board member say, I've experienced it, I know what you're going through, means a lot, and hopefully we can have that conversation so we can get better, because it's a nationwide problem. You know that, and I know that, and the sooner we can get our hands wrapped around that problem, so we can solve it, the better it's going to be for all of our students.
No doubt.
Well, and I know how
retaining
much,
the teachers, hopefully.
yes, I know how much we look at data as teachers, administrators, the school board in general, and then it comes back, why aren't we growing? Why is our data showing that our students aren't excelling or making progress? And that has been a big topic lately in the buildings, but it's hard for students to do their best when, one, the learning isn't happening because of disruptions continually interfering with learning, and two, students do not feel safe in their classrooms because of the students that are acting out. And so knowing that you are going to put forth the effort to change that safety issue, not just for us teachers. I mean, I'm in it every day, dealing with students that have those behaviors, but it worries me more so in the classroom, not just as a teacher in the buildings, but as a parent who has a child in a classroom that had a student that was a behavior issue, and how scared she was, and to know that she is an A student excelling, and I can say for the first time ever her NWA scores dropped this spring. So when we look at data and we wonder why our students aren't achieving, it could be because our teachers aren't able to teach because of the disruptions and the things going on in the classroom. They cannot get it done when they're having to deal with the behavior all the time. And so it's not always the teacher's fault that the data isn't showing learning. It's not always the curriculum's fault. And so to know that you are going to address these issues makes me feel much better that we're going to take care of the policies and make it happen.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Well, any last comments about item H? All right, thank you. Item I and J, we had always kind of pushed those to the end. The negotiated agreement language cleanup. I assume that just comes next after we put all the updates in there?
Mrs. Schwartz and I will have to set a time here, probably maybe Thursday morning, if it's okay for me to leave my building Thursday morning to come meet with Mr. Harris and Twyla. If it works with you, I'm not sure what
I'll make it work.
you know, and because if it'd be Thursday afternoon too, whatever works for you on Thursday.
It's just fine. You don't have any students on Thursday.
No students on Thursday, and we're leaving at 6:30 to go for a track, so that wouldn't be until next Tuesday.
That's only because you have to drive the bus.
That's only because I have to drive the bus. So, whatever works best for you Thursday.
I'll let you know.
And then, you know, Mr. Harris, we meet with you and Twyla just to make sure we have all the language that we need. I would ask that Twyla send out the tentative agreements that we currently have, that we've created tonight, to all of us, so that if we, and I know that's pretty quick turnaround, and I'm not sure if you can get that done by Thursday or not. You are amazing, I know that.
Yes, she is amazing.
So that we have an opportunity to take a look at those tentative agreements before we sit down with the four of us to finalize that document. And then once that document's finalized, then we kind of comb through it and make sure both sides are good with it, and that's the way that we've negotiated it, and we'll go with that. So it's kind of up to us now.
All right, we're on it.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Okay, and I'm assuming item J with length of contract with the previous conversation with TFFR and salary, we've agreed to a 2-year contract.
Yes, we have.
Mr. Chair, one last thing on the 2-year contract. I completely agree. Could we also have that conversation for safe workplace at the same time that we have the conversation on our sunset clause? Just to see if there's been headway made.
You mean a report out or something
a
on
report
that?
out, so that there's, you know, as the two negotiating sides sit down for that sunset clause on the PTO, that there's also some discussion or report on that safe workplace
Absolutely, not a problem.
Advancement.
See, no problem at all. I mean, you'll be involved, or members of your team will be involved throughout that committee once we start putting that together in early September.
Very good. That would be my so that we can come back and revisit that as well. So, but 2-year contract, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, that sounds all in agreement. So we do not need to schedule a next meeting. We do not have agenda topics for the next meeting, so let's debrief.
Oh,
We're done.
wow.
Is that how we debrief? We're
Yep,
done.
we're done.
We got it.
Let's go ahead and debrief real quick here. I'll start.
All right, thank you, Jim.
We agreed on a tentative agreement for a 2-year contract for TFFR. That year number 1 would be 1.5% TFFR and our 2% lane or steps. Year 2 would be 2% TFFR and our 2% lanes for steps. And it was caucused and agreed on by both sides.
Correct. You're on a roll. Keep going.
Leave language. Both sides presented their leave language and PTO language. It was thoroughly discussed. Tentative agreement came up that would include the 13 days, and I don't have it with, there it is, 13 days, changing a little language in regards to ensuring that the $100 that it would be on current year's unused PTO, We accepted the language as presented by Mr. Harris as we were there. Our questions in regards to coverage and so forth were taken care of, and that tentative agreement is going to be put into place with a 1-year implemented pilot program.
And the other thing I would add on that is we need to come together and figure out a way that's mutually acceptable to protect your bank personally that you have right now, so that if this goes away in a year, you didn't lose what you gained, you banked.
And maybe what we do. And I'm not. It's been a while. Maybe what we do is and I will look out at those people, because I think about it, because I have the 5 days, almost 5 days. You know, would anybody be opposed if we set those aside for till the end of next year, and then if it doesn't, we can pull those off the table, and it would save having to send out 250 slips. Then we can either pay them out at $18, wouldn't be the $100 a day,
Right.
because that $18 an hour is actually more than $100 a day.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so it would be those would be paid out at the $18 per hour if we decide to keep PTO. But if we don't decide to keep PTO, those would be rolled back into personal leave for our leave.
I don't have any problem.
And that would alleviate the letters, it would alleviate the budget issue as well. And I don't think many of us would have an issue with that, would we? Okay.
Outstanding.
Placement on salary schedule, I'll keep going.
You bet.
Placement on salary schedule, we agreed that vocational certified teachers would be given up to 7 years on the salary schedule. And they would be able to take continuing ed grad credits up to BS plus 24, but in order to get into BS 32, they must have a bachelor's degree. Bachelor's degree.
Did you say doctorate?
No, I said bachelor's.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
You are strict.
We eliminated the maintenance standards clause. We discussed safe workforce language and came up with a task force to be put together, that the administrators would look at their regulations and consistency in August, with the task force being called for in September with representatives from all areas. Talked about cleaning up the language. The 4 of us will meet sometime in the very, very near future, and our length of contract is 2 years. Last debrief, we're done.
All right. Then we will, if nothing else, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.
So do we like give our hats off at 5 or?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks and thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh. So what's got it? You're like at the end of a practice, we just take our hats. That's like so good.
Should have brought that up this year.
Takes our hat and so good. Yes, it feels so good. I'm so excited. I'm having another good one.
So far, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh gosh, no way.
The news went out last night.
Okay.
I know. Some of them can be a little,
This is my
I'm not.
well, good luck.
Well, thanks, students.
Enjoy golf.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we only have a few left. I usually schedule a tournament twice already. And now this bracket's supposed to be cold and rainy. Ridley and I were talking. Yeah, I have to. Regional is this coming Monday, so we usually and like no, we leave that. Our boys come tomorrow and I so luckily tell them we'll travel up to yeah, it's a long way away.
it's quite a community. So.
Yes, so yeah, we'll go there and play, and then like top 6 students.
Do they do any rabbit?
Yep, they do. If you make all conference, which means they take your average and you get to drop 2, so like 7 out of 9. So top 10 all conference, and then if you make top 10 all regions, including the high, and then I still have you to do the 7 over pro, 7 over medal. So like, it's a really good yeah, so hopefully.
Well, that's exciting. I miss my old days of coaching golf.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's good to know. So, well, good luck to you.
Thank
Good
you
luck to you.
very much. Oh, feeling good. You too.
Thanks, guys.
Feel great.
Thank you again. This is my, just so you know, we sent the information out. I am resigning from the negotiations. It's been
I've only been
and
that's why I look at it all the time.
Don't do this again for 2 more years. You could think about it.
Yeah, see?
I could, but I don't think I would.
No.
I think it's just, it took, this last year, we were 3 or 4 weeks to take this. The springtime before,
Oh, it's so good. And it's like, practice, but I feel like I'm being not where I'm supposed to be.
Good negotiations, trust legislation.
Oh, my Lord, yes.
we have our own path. Because we negotiate anything that we could negotiate up to months. Yep, so all of that stuff was done so that when legislation finally closed in early April, we made up money right away. And then we were done.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Can I have that?
Well, you just gotta make sure that what has happened in the past is principals are administrative